Aloha and welcome, everyone. I'm Mike Kakane, CEO of the Hawaii Community Foundation. I want to thank you for joining us today for our House Maui webinar. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge some very special guests who are with us today. First, I'd like to acknowledge our Board of Governor from Maui, Tamar Goodfellow. Appreciate her leadership on our board and has provided amazing representation for Maui. Also like to recognize our local leadership from our Maui Leadership Council, who Tamar serves on as well, but Paul Mancini and Cordy McLaughlin are joining us today. I'd also like to recognize the great leadership we've received from our legislators from Maui. With us this afternoon, Senator Gil Agaran and Representative Kyle Yamashita. I'd also like to thank the County Council members who are with us today and the leadership and interest they're showing in housing on Maui. Our chair, Alice Lee, and council members Gabe Johnson, Tasha Kama, Kelly King, Yuki Lee Sujimura, and Kiani Rollins Fernandez. Thank you again for your leadership and your presence and interest here today. You know, we convened back in August of 2019 when this housing issue was really just a conversation for us. It was a concept we were talking about. But here we are 2 years later, hopefully on the tail end of the pandemic. And we want to bring you all together again and show you the progress that we've made. And so we're looking forward to this conversation. Again, want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. You can jump to the next slide, please. Before we begin, want to get a little bit of engagement, and you'll see a question up here on the screen. And again, we want your answer here. So the question is, if we could solve one issue to create affordable housing, what would it be? And so we're asking that you put your answer in the chat box. Your name will not be shared with others. So this will be an anonymous answer. And at the end of our conversation this afternoon, we're going to bring these questions back, these answers back up and kind of survey and see how we're doing against the work we're trying to do through the House Maui strategy and some of the answers that you provided. So we'll give you a few seconds. So please go ahead and enter your answer in the chat box. Again, if we could solve one issue to create affordable housing on Maui, what would it be? What's your one main challenge that you feel needs to be overcome in order for more housing to be created for local families? So again, we'll give you a few more seconds here to drop your recommendations into the chat box. And again, at the end of our conversation today, we're going to bring these answers back up. And if we're not addressing some of these issues, we're going to make sure we have a conversation to deal with this later. Okay, you guys can keep putting those into the chat box. I'm going to ask that we move on to the next slide to get our conversation going. So many of you folks may have heard about the Hawaii Community Foundation's change framework. It's a curated set of data that we compile across 6 primary sectors, and it helps us to understand the well-being of Hawaii's people and place. And the change framework is an acronym: community economy, health and wellness, arts and culture, natural environment, government, civic engagement, and education. And then what sits under these 6 sectors are 19 subsectors. And today we're going to talk about the C sector, which is community economy. And we're going to talk about housing affordability and cost of living. And in that subsector, we're aiming to address the current situation statewide, which is that 56% of renters in the entire state of Hawaii and 40% of homeowners are cost burdened by housing. So these are the indicators that we want to change. So if we can move to the next slide, please. These are the indicators that we're looking at. And so why was Maui selected across all the counties in the state of Hawaii? Why was Maui selected? Well, first off, Maui has the highest cost burden compared to the rest of the state. The makeup of your community is changing. You can see here by that middle indicator, local families leaving at a higher rate. So the demographics basically say that you're the first county where there's more people who are not from Maui who are now living on Maui. Also, one of the main reasons why we selected Maui is because you're a big enough county with enough activity for, we think that we can get all of our arms around. You folks are 180 plus thousand people. You folks are a thriving county. And we feel very strongly that if we can figure out Maui, where the challenges are the greatest, that perhaps we can share this statewide. And so you folks are really the crisis within the crisis when it comes to housing. And so again, we're putting a lot of our efforts into Maui to prove that this problem can be solved, and hopefully we can share some of this modeling to other counties as we go forward. We can move to the next slide, please. Again, so our goal in House Maui is to bring all levels of government, elected leaders, nonprofits, home builders, businesses, philanthropists, and the community together to create affordable housing solutions on Maui so that local families can continue to call Maui their home. This is our goal for House Maui, but it's also our goal for the entire state. We want to be able to demonstrate a model on Maui that we can replicate to eliminate the housing crisis in Hawaii statewide. And so we're doing this by increasing the pipeline of qualified renters and home buyers, building community support for more housing, which is critical. That civic engagement is critical to this process for us. Identifying tools and policies that accelerate housing production at all levels, and growing the knowledge base of decision makers on affordable housing issues and opportunities. I think we all, including ourselves, can learn more about this issue and why it's plagued Hawaii for decades. And as a result, our families are suffering. We can move to the next slide, please. So what is HCF's role? We see our role in three primary areas, primarily as a convener. And so our goal is really to bring about a cross-sector of stakeholders to collaborate and try to help us figure this issue out. We're a funder, and while we manage a tremendous amount of resources, this issue requires a tremendous amount of additional resources. And so we really want to leverage our resources for impact. And finally, we see our role as a catalyst for the work to address housing affordability. And so again, we are a convener, we're a funder, and we see ourselves as a catalyst. You move to the next slide, please. House Maui is a three-pronged approach, and we're going to talk a lot about this with other speakers going forward. But that three-pronged approach is really around aligning new and existing resources. How do we align these resources for greater impact? Our second pillar is around educating and empowering, and that's really around the constituencies of Maui County. And they want to organize and engage. As I said earlier, we really feel that the civic engagement element of solving this problem is going to be critical for our success. We can move to the next slide, please. And so right now I'm going to pass the mic over to one of my colleagues. He's the Vice President of Community Partnerships and Public Affairs. It should be no stranger to many of you. He served in public office for 2 terms as the chair of Honolulu County Council, and comes with a tremendous amount of background in home building and real estate development. So I'd like to pass the mic over to my colleague, Todd Apo. Todd?
All righty, mahalo Micah, and aloha everyone. Glad to be with you this afternoon. Going to take us through really quickly our first pillar of aligning new and existing resources. And we'll talk about it generally and then talk about some of the successes that we're seeing through our first steps with our House Maui initiative. But it's all about working together. It's aligning, from the political side and government side, federal, state, and county resources. Finding ways to have government take back the responsibility for regional infrastructure, recognizing that over the years, and we've seen this in all the counties, that as those off-site regional infrastructure costs got put onto developments, it's only caused housing prices to continue to increase. And so we're finding ways that the burden doesn't fall just on the counties, but by bringing in the state and federal governments and their resources, especially in today's world where we all know the federal government is looking at some significant infrastructure opportunity dollars, making sure that those are aligned into these housing efforts. The second is just finding those new capital resources. And we'll talk a little bit about the social impact investing success that's gone on so far, but it really goes to the idea that it's not just about the building of homes and making sure families are ready, but it's finding the ways in other parts of those families' lives and other services that surround the families and the development of homes that can really help. So making sure that those things aren't happening in silos, but when you get into the social investment impacts, they're aligned with the overall initiative to drive the ultimate goals. And then finally, on the philanthropic side, obviously with Hawaii Community Foundation, it's one piece that we believe we bring expertise, and making sure that as we work with our donors and those that are interested, obviously in housing and those families, but also just in philanthropic efforts generally in Hawaii, that they start to see this opportunity to participate in initiatives that are bringing true results. And so finding the way that philanthropic dollars can come into this effort, and it may be by finding other ways to take costs off of families so that they can afford a home, or they can save up for that first month's rent. Those types of alignments become very important. So move on to the next slide. So all comes with building partnerships, and the county has been a huge partner in this, both at the administrative side and at the legislative side. And so the efforts that both the mayor and his administration, the council, have been going through have been very good movements. And again, as Micah mentioned, our role as Hawaii Community Foundation has really been to just try to be that convener, making sure the right discussions are going on. There's obviously a lot of different ideas as to how these solutions come into place, but bringing the parties together, making sure the right priorities are set, making sure the right policies are set, is a way that we're going to go about reaching this first pillar and the goals around it. So next slide. Just want to run through a couple of milestone examples that we've seen with this. So the first one is the Waiale Road extension. So many of you may be familiar with this. This is Central Maui, so part of the House Maui initiative. The determination was based on the data that Central Maui was the first region to start in. And we'll talk about how we start looking at other regions. And then, as Micah mentioned, ultimately get into statewide and other counties. But we saw this road extension that was about a $31 million expected cost that originally was sitting on the county and the developers to pay for that road. The effort through this current calendar year has been to bring in state and federal resources in order to do that. And we've been successful with state DOT being willing to reprioritize some of their projects towards this road. Obviously, the federal government looking at putting in money as well. And what we've needed to show them is that there's additional affordable housing that will get built because this road extension gets done. And it's a part that's not always seen as part of development was the school aspect of it. So as you increase the population in this Central Maui area, there's a need for a new elementary and middle school. And so the state legislators for the region really worked with the legislature to get a little over $50 million allocated and appropriated for the school infrastructure that's needed. It's all those pieces of the puzzle that need to come together in order to bring these solutions. There's also, as mentioned, the last bullet, county-owned lands that are in this area that will benefit from the road extension and the school inclusion. And so we're really seeing the potential success as we continue to move forward in this Central Maui area. Next slide. The last piece I'll touch on is that initiative funding, right? So $2.5 million have been deployed in regards to social impact investments. And so that's really getting money, new capital out into the community in organizations that are helping families be ready for homes, helping families in their lives so that they can be go through the types of help and training that the FOC provides in order to have them into homes, whether it's rental or ownership. But we're seeing the value of that social impact investing, and we'll continue to look at how to grow those options. And then the House Maui initiative itself, it's, we've secured 2.75 out of a budgeted 3.2 million for the first 3 years of this effort. And within those first 3 years, we hope to get through a plan for Central Maui, South Maui, and West Maui. And, given the demand, we know that's not going to cover everything. We know we're probably going to have to continue sort of that cycle through the different regions, but proving the pilot project over the first 3 years with the fundraising so far, and we'll work to get to the end of that, is really going to be what helps drive us to our final success. So that's our first pillar. Move to the next slide and take the time to introduce Michelle Kauhane. Michelle is our Senior Vice President of Community Grants and Initiatives, and she's going to talk us through our second pillar. All yours, Michelle.
Thanks, Todd. Again, the second pillar of our House Maui strategy is to educate and empower, which is highly focused on local residents themselves. And so together we are supporting Maui residents and families to give them the tools and resources necessary to build their own financial capabilities, to empower them with down payment assistance and other support services. And also at the same time, we're looking to increase the capacity of HUD housing counseling agencies and providers on island who can help to really create this wellspring of qualified families, so that home builders have a pipeline of those who are qualified on island to be eligible for whether those are rental or home ownership opportunities. Next slide. The Maui Financial Opportunity Center, we keep talking about the FOC. The FOC stands for Financial Opportunity Center. It's a evidence-based model that is happening nationally through an organization called LISC. Hawaiian Community Assets is a 501c3 and a financial opportunity center. They opened and reestablished themselves on Maui this year in 2020. So their doors are now opened, and to date, they're currently working with 865 local residents on island. Our goal is to try to get 1,000 families per year, because we know it takes time for folks to get through this process to become eligible for home ownership or rental opportunities if there are credit issues or savings goals that they have. Of those 865 families, 760 of them have completed homebuyer education workshops, and there are over 100 families currently in counseling services that are meeting regularly with a financial counselor at the FOC. We're also super excited to share with you folks that of those clients, we have 13 families who are currently working with the FOC who participated in the county's lottery to get down payment assistance at $30,000 towards their home purchase. And so just really early signs that their work is having a tremendous impact, and we're really excited about all of the families that they've engaged to date. The next slide. This is a story really of one of the families from the FOC that we thought that we would share to you, to just give an example about how the Financial Opportunity Center is really impacting local residents on Maui. This couple, Ashley and Caleb, have been living with Caleb's family. And when asked what owning a home means to them, they both use just one word, and that is stability. So we know that home ownership is about stable grounding for young families and for their children. And really their why is their cute little boy whose name is Lihao. And their goal was really to move out of an overcrowded situation while appreciative of their family having a place for them. It was really overcrowded, and they were very much interested in having a place of their own for Lihao to grow up. They heard about the Financial Opportunity Center through friends and have now engaged in a match savings program where they will be getting a match for each dollar that they save to go towards their down payment for their home. We're excited to let you know that they were also a participant in a recent lottery, and they were selected for a Hoku'ula workforce housing project, which is an affordable project in Ha'ilimaile. So they're just one example of a family working directly with the FOC that we're really proud of the early success that we're seeing. Next slide. The third pillar, I'm going to turn this over to our colleague. I'm going to spend a little time explaining, because when we met in 2019, many of you have not been able to meet her yet. Marissa Sandblom is a newer member of our HCF team, and she is our senior Neighbor Island leader over philanthropy and initiatives, and she's actually a local resident of Kauai, but she leads all of our Neighbor Island teams, and so I welcome Marissa.
Thanks, Michelle. Our third pillar of House Maui is organize and engage. Together, we are partnering with local residents, nonprofits, government, and the private sector to advocate for regulatory and public policy changes needed to create affordable housing on Maui. As you heard earlier, civic engagement is of critical importance, and House Maui is strongly encouraging community voice by families impacted by the housing crisis to participate in solution building. An example of one of our partnerships is our 11-member advisory council, which was formed in April of 2020 and is dedicated to identifying opportunities to increase home production for Maui residents. I would like to recognize a few of our House Maui Advisory Council members who are with us today: Wes Lowe, Bruce U'u, Leilani Pomano, Grant Chun, Howard Kihune, and Saumalu Mata'apa. Mahalo for your service. And as we go to the next slide, I would like to introduce Wes Lowe, CEO of Ohana Pacific Management Company, to share a little more about the Advisory Council. Wes?
Thanks, Marissa. Aloha, everybody. I've been tasked to talk a little bit about the Advisory Council. So firstly, I'm really flattered that I was asked to be on the Advisory Council. I am not technically a developer. I built a few things, but not a developer in the truest sense of the word. So it was good. It was a diverse group that we had. It was not the usual suspects. And I would say lovingly from my heart that we got some good brothers and sisters in that group, and we definitely had some good discussions. Back in 2019, at the initial meeting at the MAC, I remember Michelle had referenced a bunch of studies that have been sitting on shelves and collected a lot of dust over the years about housing solutions. And some of them were very similar problems that we face today. And the solutions either were implemented or adopted. And as I think about the situation and the situations that I learned from, frankly, one of our own here on the call, my dear friend and mentor, Tamar Goodfellow, is that when you have big problems like this, there are no silver bullets. If it's too good to be true, it usually is not. Secondly, solving problems relies on perseverance and everybody pitching in. These are huge problems that we're facing, and we need to all try to work on this together. And probably most importantly on Maui, you need to start from the community and get ahead of the narrative and really understand the problem. The goal really is to empower a community and be more inclusive rather than fostering polarization, as we move forward. So I really appreciate that Hawaii Community Foundation took this on during such turbulent times. The leadership role from a community perspective, we have to have sustainability in this. Otherwise, we are not going to, magically solve this problem. The Advisory Council, we been at this for about a year now. And of course, we got to deal with continuing bifurcation of our economy, changing demographics, spiraling land and construction costs, and the impacts of that bugger pandemic called COVID. So, it was a challenge for us. There was a lot of opinions, a lot of arguments, and a lot of disagreements as we started talking about it. And we spent a lot of time focusing on the comprehensive affordable housing plan. Again, lots of heavy conversations, but I think we started talking, and I think that was probably the most important thing, is that we did feel okay to argue and voice our opinions. Again, it reaffirmed my beliefs that there are no silver bullets, perseverance and pitching in, and on Maui, you really need to get ahead of the narrative. So I think we're just starting the discovery and the journey to the solutions. I'll wrap this up pretty quickly, but some key takeaways from our Advisory Council meetings, at least from my perspective. The Comprehensive Affordable Housing Plan was just a plan, and every specific project has its challenges. And I think it was clear that we have to be careful of unintended consequences of policy decisions. We need to be flexible and not too prescriptive, because plans and projects sometimes go sideways on each other. We don't have a comprehensive solution yet, but we have started the journey. Again, nobody can shoulder the whole burden. We all need to contribute to solve this problem. And lastly, I think we've started the discussion to be less myopic in our views of the problems and solutions. I think we've discussed that this is not only about cost, it's about income, it's about community development, it's about education, it's about food sustainability, it's about self-sufficiency, it's about civic engagement. I think Todd talked about it a lot. This is about social impact. Frankly, I think that maybe our goal is to be a better Hawaii, I think, as Micah has coined, as opposed to affordable housing. Affordable housing is a key component of it, and maybe somebody wants to only grab the web whole and start trying to solve it together. I think Hawaii Community Foundation's change framework is giving us the opportunity to leverage all the other resources much like Todd said, is where we can look at capitalizing on social impact investing and solving all of our problems as opposed to just trying to solve one part of it. It does have to be a multi-pronged approach. So I guess my last comment is perseverance and open minds are needed. I'm grateful to be part of this hard work, but I do have full expectations that Hawaii Community Foundations will be the catalyst to sustain this effort. If we don't have this catalyst, I'm not sure that we won't be able to sustain this, and this is not going to be solved overnight. I think we need a long-term effort on this, and I appreciate all that Hawaii Community Foundation has done. Thank you. I think I turn it back to Marissa.
Mahalo, Wes. We appreciate your insight. Thank you for that. Moving on to the next slide. It's exciting to share a few milestones related to our organize and engage work. We strongly believe that community engagement is key, everyone coming to the table and talking to each other. It didn't happen overnight, and we still have a ways to go, but we are beginning to gain cross-sector alignment among advocates who support moving the issue of affordable housing forward. One example of how HCF is looking at the entire spectrum of housing across Maui is our partnership with Hawaiian Community Assets. We support HCA's community outreach and engagement as it is helping to bring various stakeholders and underrepresented groups into the planning process. We believe that regional plans are crucial in cementing key strategies. House Maui research identified Central Maui as a starting point for the housing strategy, resulting in priority projects to deliver between 4,000 to 6,000 affordable units for sale and rent. In our next phase, as Todd mentioned, we will focus on a South Maui regional plan. Regarding outreach and awareness, we have developed and launched tools to activate residents, including a website and social media presence. We will soon be doing action alerts and advocacy training to further engage Maui residents in sharing their voice. And now I'd like to ask Micah to share what's next. Micah?
Thank you, Marissa. Appreciate it. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So what's next? So most important, your voice being added to this journey with us is critical. We want to get in front, if you're an employer, we want to get in front of your employees. We want to have the FOC get an opportunity to talk to your employees. If you just take that 50%, you should be assuming as an employer that 50% of your employees are cost burdened by housing. And so we want to get them through the FOC program, want to get their capacity being built and help them move into a home that's being planned for them. We want to engage these employers. They're critical stakeholders to our effort. We're going to ask that you jump on our website and you can go into the engage section and sign up. And so you'll be getting our notices from us. We'd like to ask that you follow us on social media. Instagram has been an active post for us. I'm learning that. I'm a new Instagrammer, and House Maui is getting me going there. So really want your engagement. We want your participation. We want your voice. We want to keep you posted on the progress we're making. We know that our collective efforts can only make a great impact on Maui's families if we're all in this together. We're going to be reaching out to you after this event to find out how we can best work with you as we move the House Maui strategy forward. I can tell you that the families that are in the FOC, they're doing their part. So we got to do ours, and we're committed to this. So on behalf of the HCF team, our board, I want to thank you folks for your support. Aloha and mahalo.